Don't make this retirement mistake. I've said this on various videos before, and I'll say it again. I will scream it from the rooftops. I'm in a rooftop, actually. I'm on a rooftop? I guess I'm not. But anyway, don't make this because it's critical, critical, critical. I mean, look, if you make it and then you work with me, I'll look good. And I hope you make me look good, and I hope you send me that sweet, sweet money. And the way you can send me that sweet, sweet money is hitting that like button. And don't forget to subscribe. Like button, subscribe. Do it for Pablo. Don't do it for your buddy Josh and his pearly yellows. Do it for Pablo, who's missing bottom teeth. Poor boy. Do it for Pablo. Please hit the like button. Poor Pablo. Anyway, so when I work with people, and they make this mistake, I look like a genius. And I said, well, yeah, I am a genius, but this is just a lack of paying attention to detail. So we're going to use Fred and Wilma here. Wilma! Remember Wilma? She was pretty hot. Her and Betty, they were pretty hot. Let's see, Wilma, Betty, and was it Daphne? Who was the one on Scooby-Dooby-Doo? Daphne. Yeah, they were pretty smoking hot. For you youngins, you don't even know what we're talking about. It's us old people who grew up in the 70s who knew Wilma, Daphne, and Betty. Why was Betty going out with Barney anyway? Barney's like 2 foot tall. He's like the size of Joe Rogan. Why was Betty? I mean, did Barney have a lot of money? Why was Betty hanging out with Barney? There's got to be a backstory there. Anyway, so we're going to use Fred and Wilma here, and these are real clients of mine who I just got off the horn with 2 days ago from New Jersey. Just legends, crushing the whole. I mean, it's like, dude, the whole story is fantastic because just just start with nothing, keep your head clean, stay married, stay in the same house, just the same job. Wake up one day and you're like, man, we're worth more than $1 million of liquid net worth, and it's amazing. Only in America, baby. But remember, the 401k is horrible, horrible. All right. So anyway, let's look at some numbers here. So here they are, their current plan, 27%. Oh my goodness, why is that only 27%? There's one simple trick. Watch the end of the video so you know what the one simple trick is. We went from 27 to 89. All right, so let me show you what's going on here. Here's what they put in cash flow. They put $8,500 a month for yearly expenses. All right, so 85, that's about 100,000 a year. Now, the problem with the software and a lot of software programs and anything that you really want to delineate, is that the right word? Delineate or separate various expenses. So we want to separate healthcare cost from housing cost and from day-to-day living expense cost. The reason for that is, for me, first and foremost, is that healthcare cost is inflated at 5.5%. All right. Housing costs, you can inflate it whatever you want, 3, 2.5, I don't care. But healthcare costs has a significant inflation component that we don't want to throw in a lump sum with other things with a less of an inflation component. We just don't. We want healthcare costs to rise at that significant 5.5%. Housing costs should be separate as well because both healthcare and housing are literally, they're not discretionary. They're mandatory expenses, all right? So you can't reduce your expenditures on healthcare and housing because you are running out of money. You can't. So we should always exclude healthcare, housing, and taxes because, again, non-discretionary. And the amount of taxes you pay are contingent on from where your money is coming from. So we should have at least 4 line items. We should have just day-to-day random living expenses, somewhat discretionary, food, going to see the Buffalo Bills game, I don't know, freaking electricity costs, all that stuff. It should be in one. You can kind of lump those all together. But then you have healthcare, then you have housing costs, and then you have taxes. So there should be at least 4 line items. So Wilma, who I'm talking to, and Fred, they put everything in one line item at $8,500. They said we need about $100,000 all inclusive to cover our expenditures. And so they use retirement expenditures, $8,500. But retirement expenditures are just that. That's the cost to go see the Buffalo Bills or the freaking Washington Redskins. That's the cost to fill your car up with gas. That's the cost to go on vacay. In fact, you should even separate another line item for vacation expenses. All right, so there should be at least 4 or 5 line items. You should not just throw it all in one lump sum and say, hey, I'm going to need about $100,000 a year. Because what happens is, you'll see, we're going to add, on top of that 8,500, we're going to add housing cost, healthcare costs, and income taxes. And these guys live in a very high property tax state. So housing costs is pretty significant. Healthcare costs is pretty significant, and taxes. So when all is said and done in the software, basically come down here, we got them spending after they burned through their pre-tax money, and now they're in their post-tax money. I mean, sorry, after they burned through their post-tax money, and now they're in their pre-tax money. We got them spending $165,000, and what they meant was they're only going to be spending roughly $100,000 all in. And I always ask them, I said, all right, if I gave you a check for $100,000, would that cover everything? Let me take my wife got me an espresso machine, and it's freaking delectable, dudes. Maybe I'll put the link in the show notes. If you want to get your husband, I will. If you buy the espresso machine through me, I get that sweet, sweet thing. You want to get your husband freaking satisfied, other than getting jiggy with it. Get him an espresso machine, dude. It's freaking fantastic. It really is. It's so good. It's kind of a pain in the butt to make, in terms of you don't just put in a Keurig, but man, it's so good. So, ladies, if you want to satisfy your husband, buy him an espresso machine. I'll put the thing in the show notes too. Anyway, so I forgot what I was saying. All right, so in this case, they said we need about $100,000 a year. And I said, yeah, but I got you spending about $165 when you factor in taxes, healthcare, housing costs, and all that. They're like, oh, that's too high. And that's what led us to this right here. So I said, if I gave you $100,000, would that? If I said, here, 1 January, here's a check for $100,000, Wilma, would that cover all your expenses? I said, absolutely. I said, okay, well, we got you showing significantly higher than that right here. And we broke it down. I showed him why, and then I said, okay, so let's reduce this day-to-day housing cost from $8,500 to $7,000, and we're going to reduce our expenses basically by $20,000 a year, because again, we already have healthcare covered in a different line item. We already have housing covered in a different line item. We already have taxes covered in a different line item. So basically, you're double billing yourself. And when we do that, when we separate them in the software, we get an 89% probability of success. And I look like a genius. And I'm like, look, you're going to die with $1.12 million, not including your house, and you got 89% probability. And again, the sweet spot is 85. Between 80 and 90 is fine. Because she wants to retire ASAP. She's like, dude, I'm done. I'm ready to go. And when I showed her initially 27% probability, you can see it. She's like, man, that sucks, dude. I'm like, this is why I said on my video I did yesterday, you tell me $1 million you can't retire, give me a break. Yeah, but that's a mistake. Understand your expenses and separate them to various line items, all right? It's a big deal. So I'm using a 3% inflation on discretionary stuff, a 5.5% inflation on healthcare. You can use whatever you want on property tax. I use 3% as there as well. But if you just throw it in one lump sum, you're reducing your expenditures on healthcare because the inflation is less. And you don't really have as much control because you're saying, this is what I need, $100,000. I said, yeah, but what if the markets go down? Could you live on $80,000? Yeah, of course. How do you live on $80,000? You don't take a vacation. And that's another reason why you'd want a separate line item for vacation. Expenses drive the freaking bus, dude. Expenses drive the bus. Get to no expenses and get retirement peace of mind. All right, God bless. Love your thoughts. Paw away. Shh, shh.